So it's extremely obvious we're gonna hit a jackpot on the river if I just call, but I move all in because this guy can't fold a jackpot hand, right? Let's rewind a second. That's me, Marc Goone, and I'm playing low stakes to prove that with a whole lot of exploits, $100 an hour may just be possible. In this episode, I might have just screwed up the bad beat jackpot, and my table mates may or may not attempt to murder me.
Let's all stay calm here. Let's all be calm.
All in.
Mark, why would you do that? Why would you do that?
I don't know what you guys are talking about. If he had the hand, the money would be in already. Will I win the jackpot? Can I stay on track to win $100 an hour at 5-5? Let's find out.
Down bad, bounce back, boy, I'm different. Watch how I handle my business. Watch with the hands not ticking. Listen, that's that drum kick, boom, coming out of my system.
All right, very first significant hand of the session here. The hijack opens to 20, and we call in the big blind with 7-6 of spades. Flop comes 7-8-4 rainbow, so we flop middle pair with a gutter. Not all that bad. We check it, and the hijack checks it back. We're going to a turn, which is a 9 of clubs, and at this point, no real reason to come out and monkey bet here. If this turn checks through, we're pretty sure we've got the best hand all the time, and just happy to get to showdown, so we check it over. Now the hijack bets 25, and at this point, a couple things have changed. Now we're pretty sure the hijack does have some showdown value. Maybe a hand like ace-7 suited, ace-9 suited, or possibly a club draw. And if he does have a hand like ace-7 or ace-9, we think we can get that to fold with a huge check raise and then a river barrel. And if he's got a club draw, well, we can get a bunch of value here on this turn. So we go for the big boy check raise to $200. He doesn't think all that long, and he is going to fold. All right, next hand here, we open it up to $20 on the button with queen jack offsuit. The small blind, a European pro, or at least a trying European, puts in a 3-bet to 70. Not sure if he's a pro. You know, if you're coming to America to play 5-5, 1,000 cap and paying all of the expenses to get here and stay here, probably not a very strong pro, but nevertheless, he makes it 70. And at this point, he is 3-bet pretty aggressively so far, kind of playing a 3-bet or fold strategy. And this may not be the best hand in the world to put in the 4-bet, but you know, not the worst either. Makes it less likely he's got queens or jacks, and we think he can just be relatively wide here from the small blind. So we are going to put in the 4-bet to $175. He is not going to think long, and he is going to call. And when he calls with this type of speed, I'm probably ruling out hands like aces and kings. Probably he would at least consider 5-betting with those types of hands. So he puts in a quick call. Flop comes ace-9-10 with a couple of spades, checks over to us. I've been experimenting with this quite a bit, just going 10% pot in 4-bet pots when the flop is ace high. If you think about it from a theory perspective, pocket aces probably want to go really, really small here for us, but also from a real life useful perspective, we would also like pocket jacks, pocket queens, pocket kings, stuff like that to call one time on the flop, and then we can get all that stuff to fold on the turn. So we go $40, he calls, turn is the innocuous 4 of diamonds. And at this point, when he checks it over, my instinct is to put in another small bet here and then to lay down the hammer on the river, leaving that big boy overbet behind. I'm not sure this is amazing though, because if he calls the turn, he's very likely to have a hand like ace king or ace queen suited or something like that. And I'm just not sure that hand is folding by the river. So I'm not sure if I love this barrel all that much on the turn. It does work, we get the fold, but I actually may prefer just checking back this turn. And then if he checks the river, we go for it. All right, next hand here, the straddle is on, so we're playing 5-5-10. We look down at one of the prettiest hands in all of poker, queen jack of hearts, and we open it up to 35 in the low jack. The cutoff, the button, and the straddle are going to call. We're going to a flop which comes 9 queen 4 with a couple of spades, and with more players in position to us than out of position, both the cutoff and button are in position to us, only the straddle is out of position to us. My MO here is kind of to check my entire range. Sometimes I will deviate here and just bet off my thick value, hands like overpairs, ace queen, stuff like that. If the flop checks through, we can just go for some thick value on the turn and use very big sizes, and if either the cutoff or button stab, we can get a lot of information from their bet sizing, but it checks through, and now the turn turn is a jack of diamonds. Now the straddle comes out and bets $90, which is a pretty big bet, 90 into 145. If we had a straight here, I would obviously be raising, but I'm still a bit concerned that the straddle himself can have some straights. He's going to tell us a lot more about the strength of his hand with his river size, and then we can proceed from there. The river is the beautiful queen of clubs, so we make the nuts, and now he comes out and bets 150. And when he comes out and bets $90 into 3 other people on the turn, and then bets 150 on this river, I think at the very worst, he has trip queens here, and he could also just have a straight here and be a little bit concerned about the board pairing. So this seems like a horrible spot to bluff. I would never want to bluff this guy off trip queens or a straight. So I'm just gonna make the big boy all in size. I jam for 930 effective. He goes into the tank. He tanks, he tanks, he tanks. We are praying for the call, obviously. Finally, after a couple minutes of tanking, the straddle is begrudgingly going to put in the call. We show our hand. We are good.
8, 9, 10, queen, jack, straight. You got a full house, dude. I have a straight.
All right, next hand here, straight 5-5. We're playing against former Hungry Horse Boy Sammy Breakfast here. He opens to 25 in the low jack, and my MO is to play 3-bet pots in position heads up. So I'm going to put in the 3-bet here to $90 with pocket deuces, and he is going to call. Flop comes king, queen, 9, rainbow. He checks my MO, 3-bet pots, heads up in position. I am just going 1/3 pot. I go $60.
What do you have?
Me?
Yeah.
I have ace king.
And he puts in the call. Turn is an offsuit 10. He checks. And at this point, I think most of our hands want to check. And even if he does have a jack, if we bet small here, I'm not sure a jack would fast play all the time. So we can just run into a bunch of brick walls here. So I am just going to check back on this turn with the plan of bluffing the river and repping a hand like 2-pair or a set. The river is now the 7 of spades. He comes out and bets 150 into 305. And at this point, we can't beat anything. He could still have some jack X. I just fold, and he shows the 10 of spades, which of course beats us. I'm not really sure why he shows that specific card. It's very hard to be bluffing when he has the 10 of spades, but he rakes in the pot, and it's 1-0 Sammy Breakfast. All right, next hand here, the cutoff limps, and Mr. Sammy Breakfast going to go for the ISO in the small blind. He's going to make it $40. We looked at a queen 10 of hearts. This is pretty interesting. We could elect to call here and let the recreational player come in the cutoff, but it's not the ideal spot for that, because if we call, we're gonna kind of be monkey in the middle here. We're gonna be next to act post flop. This hand is strong enough to 3-bet. So we go $120 hairs here with the queen 10 of hearts. The cutoff is going to fold back around to Sam. And at this point, we start talking to maybe try to fluster him just a little bit.
Think in your head about
I'm
what
thinking,
you're
I'm
about to
thinking.
do.
I'm sorry, guys.
Is
It's
he
really-
allowed to take this long?
Okay.
You're all getting frustrated with
I
it.
know.
So after counting out possibly some 4-bet chips, he puts in the call. So a little bit of a clue here. He was obviously thinking about 4-betting, but he decided just to call here. Flop comes jack, jack, queen with a couple of diamonds. He checks it over, and I go $60 here. I think I just miscounted the size of the pot. Probably should just go 80, but he puts in the call. We are going to a turn, which is the 7 of hearts. And when he checks it over, I think this is actually close and just a little bit harder to get value in a 3-bet pot. He's not going to have as many draws here. I think this is more of a way ahead, way behind spot than it looks like at first glance. So I'm actually going to check this back and just go for 2 streets on the river if it is a clean river, but it's not a clean river. It's the 5 of diamonds, and he checks it over. It may be a little bit too thin when the flush draw comes in here on this river. If we had a hand like ace queen, I would just be always betting this river, but I'm not really sure particularly what hand we're trying to get value from. A hand like pocket 10s maybe. Just seems like we're not going to get paid from that from a thinking player. We check, and he says ace high. We make him show because he is a rake. We make the rake show, and he has ace king, and we take it down. We're here with Jake Poker Vegas, the creator of the best short form poker content. Do you think $100 an hour can be made at 5-5, 1,000 cap, 20 big blinds an hour?
I don't think I can do that, but maybe a good player, crusher, maybe can do it.
Would you bet money on it that I can make over $100 an hour at 5-5?
I think so. I will bet. I will bet on your name.
How much would you bet?
Like $50?
You heard it here first. Thank you, Mr. Jake Poker Vegas. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
What did you do? Do that again.
I did like this.
All right, next hand here, straight 5-5. Recreational player opens to 25 from under the gun. We're in the cutoff with King 10 of clubs, and with the suited Broadway, of course, we are going to 3-bet, isolate, get it heads up in position where we can realize our edge. Don't want it to go multi-way where we're gonna have to play bingo. So we make it 80, under the gun calls. We're going to a flop, which comes 6-3 deuce with a couple of hearts. He checks it over, and my MO, 3-bet pots, heads up in position, 1/3 pot. I go a little bit bigger here, $60, because I still think he's going to raise off his strong stuff on this flop, even to a little bit of a bigger size. The flop is so wet and dynamic, and I also don't think he really has many sets or straights here when he opens from under the gun, if any at all, so we can just get away with going a little bit bigger. We go 60, he calls. Turn is now a 5 of hearts, and at this point he can have some flushes, so we want to choose a size that's going to incentivize him to raise off a lot of his flushes here on this turn. So on blank rivers, we know that if he check calls the turn, probably doesn't have a flush at a high frequency, and we can put down the big boy overbet bluff on the river. So we go 100 into 285 here, again, trying to incentivize him to raise off his flushes. He thinks about it for a little while, and then he puts in the call. River is the 7 of diamonds, and when he checks it over, we are pretty sure at this point he has a hand like an overpair, maybe an overpair with a heart, maybe a hand like pocket 9s or pocket 10s or pocket jacks or something like that. We want to make all of those hands fold and make sure if he does have some type of trap, ace 4 of hearts or something like that, that he didn't raise off the turn because he felt invulnerable, that we lose the minimum against that hand, but we make sure that we get pocket 10s, pocket 9s, pocket jacks to fold. So we go $650 here, and he tanks and tanks and tanks. And finally, he does put in the fold, and we get it through. All right, so this is the hand. We may or may not win a jackpot. We have ace king of clubs here in the hijack, and we're still raking in chips from the last pot. We actually don't see that the straddle was on, so I opened at 25 here, would just normally open to 40 if I would have saw the straddle was on. Now the cutoff and the big blind are going to call, and now the straddle, the same player from the last hand who we bluffed with king 10 of clubs, is going to put in the squeeze to 125. This guy's not messing around when he squeezes from the straddle here, closing the action. This is massively underbluffed. He is relatively passive pre-flop. Recreational players in general, even pros in general, are going to just be too passive closing the action here. So we have a really, really strong hand, and if you look at the charts, it's just like always 4-bet, always 4-bet, always 4-bet. But because they are so passive from the straddle, I would just much rather proceed here with a call, just because I think they are under 4-betting so much. We actually don't mind if this goes multi-way with a hand like this, but we are going to call. The cutoff is going to get out of the way, and the big blind is going to call, so we retain ultimate position here post-flop. And just FYI, the bad beat jackpot in LA is when aces full of 10s is beat by 4 of a kind or better. So keep that in mind. The flop comes ace, ace, 8. The big blind checks, and now the pre-flop 3-better bets 125. Don't really see any reason to raise here. Of course, we think we've got essentially the nuts here. So he bets 125. We call. Big blind gets out of the way. Turn is now a 9 of hearts, bringing it back to a heart draw. He goes 300. Once again, same thing as the flop. No real reason to raise here. And he's only got about 1.2K behind. So if we call here, only going to be about an SPR of 1 going to the river. So we call. And now the river here. We hear Sammy Breakfast say it.
Please, please.
And look at that sweet baby there. The river is an ace. So now there are 3 aces on the board. We have 4 of a kind. So now if he has 10s, jacks, queens, or kings here, we have a jackpot. And the jackpot is 30K here. He bets 250. And so we quickly say, all in.
Mark. Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
No, he's really. Yeah, what would you do? I don't know what you guys are talking about. If he had the hand, the money would be in already.
If he has 10s, jacks, queens, kings, it's a jackpot, right? The jackpot is 30K, and the loser of the bad beat jackpot, the guy who gets beat by 4 of a kind or better, wins $12,000, right? So he's calling 1,000 here to win 12K if he does have a hand like 10s, jacks, queens, etc. And if he thinks I'm bluffing, well, he's calling 1,000 to win the pot, or we've got the bad beat jackpot and he wins 12K. So I don't think there's any reason for me not to go all in here and get the last 1.2K. On top of that, I need every single dollar. I'm trying to make $100 an hour, so I need every single dollar. The table is pissed at me, but if you use logic, I know there's not a lot of logic going around when you're playing low stakes poker, which is why the win rates are so astronomical. But if you use logic here, there's no way he should ever fold, but he's thinking about folding. And fortunately, Sammy Breakfast is trying to talk some common sense into him.
All right, give him a hint or something. Jesus Christ, please. Give him a hint.
I'm bluffing.
That's a pretty good hint. That's a pretty good hint.
So finally, begrudgingly, he puts in the call. The table almost lets out a sigh of relief, seeing that we get the bad beat jackpot. A couple more players tell me I am stupid. I tell them in my head that I think they are all mouth-breathing idiots. And we do win the small end of the bad beat jackpot. Straddle gets 12K, we get 6K, and the other 6 players get 2,000 apiece. So a pretty nice score here. We're not gonna count it towards our winnings, but pretty good to have a nice little 6K bonus. All right, next hand here, the low jack post here. So there is some dead money out there. And the low jack checks. We look down at pocket deuces. We are going to raise it up a little bit bigger because at the dead money 230 in the cutoff. And only the small blind is going to call. Flop comes 9-8 queen with a couple of clubs. He checks it over, and again, we are going to choose that size to force him to raise off a strong shit, call with his weak shit, usually around half pot. And a single raise pot heads up in position, so we go $30 here. He puts in the call. Now the turn is the beautiful deuce of hearts here, and on a blank turn after a wet dynamic flop. With both our bluffs and value, we probably want to go relatively big. He's not folding a hand like queen 10 or queen jack or queen X of clubs. We go with the overbet, we go 175. I actually think this is a little bit too small. We could probably just go 200 or 225. Try to get the SPR a little bit closer to 1 by the river. He is going to put in the call. Now the river is a 7 of hearts. And interestingly, he is going to come out and donk here for $200 into 480. And he's got about 405 behind. And I'm actually weighing it here. Is this too thin? Let's get things clear. This is never a bluff in a million years, right? This is just always value. He could have a couple of traps here, maybe specifically a hand like Jack 10 of clubs. Makes sense to slow play the flop. And then of course, when I overbet the turn, he's not gonna raise that hand and then comes out and donks the river, trying to get a little bit greedy. So Jack 10 of clubs makes sense, but there's really only one combo of a trap that beats me. I guess he could have 5-6 of clubs as well. That makes some sense. So I'm just gonna put in the money here. It's not that much more, and just pray that he did have maybe some type of weird river 2 pair and can't fold for 400 more. But I actually think this is much more thin than it appears on the surface if you just do a little bit of hand reading here. So I jam, he snap calls, and I turn over my hand. I actually don't think I'm good, but I show the deuces, he mucks, and we win a nice little pot. All right, at this point, we are officially sun running, and the sun run is going to continue. This is the last hand of the session, EP limps. We open it up to 30 in the cutoff with king jack off. The button small blind and the EP limper are going to call. So we are going to go to a flop 1, 2, 3, 4 ways, and look at that sweet baby there. The flop comes jack, king, king. So we flop the absolute nutter butters here. Nutter butters, why did I say nutter butters? Who have I been listening to? What kind of poker content have I been listening to where I said nutter butter? Anyway, checks over to us. We're just gonna go very small here. We've got this board locked down, but since we are essentially in position to multiple players here and only one player in position to us, we want to start putting in money. No real reason to check and slow play when in position when stacks are deep. If someone has the case king, we want to be able to cooler them, and of course no one's folding an open in straight draw. No one's folding a jack here on the flop, so we go small, and the button next to act is going to call, which is a pretty good sign here for us. We are going to a turn heads up, which is the 10 of diamonds, and at this point we want to make sure that his jack X sticks around. Hands like ace jack, hands like queen jack, and also hands like queen 10 now pair up. So we want to make sure those hands stick around. I actually elect to go 125 into 180 on the turn. I think that's too small. I think a hand like ace jack or queen jack or queen 10 is just probably not folding here for 150 or 175. So I think we could have got a little bit more greedy, but he is going to put in the call. River is a 10. So now if he does have a king, well, we are coolering the hell out of him. We did have a hand like queen 10. Well, we're still gonna win a nice little pot. If we check here, he's going to put in the bet with 10x himself. He's gonna put in the bet with king x himself, and then we can just go for the big boy check raise. So we actually decided to check here. I'm not sure I love it. Maybe just betting small is better to make sure we get the value from jack x, and then king x puts in the raise. We check, he goes 200. We jam all in for 1K effective. He is not going to think that long, and he is going to fold. Obviously, if he had a king here, we would just be getting all the money all the time, but it just seems pretty obvious to me he's got a hand like queen 10 or something like that, which is just never calling a jam. Pretty good end to the first session here, and we sunrun, we win the jackpot, and finally making some hands. All right, so we did it, guys. Pretty good session. We are back on track, up about $4,800 tonight, and actually maybe my biggest or one of my biggest 5-5 sessions ever. Just ran really, really good for the first time, made a bunch of hands, got paid, and on top of that, hit a jackpot. So got a $6,000 extra jackpot share on top of the $4,800 win. Obviously not gonna count the jackpot in the results, but the results gonna put them over here, maybe somewhere. Marco, can you just make the results pop up, Marco, somewhere over here? But anyway, we are back on track, back over $100 an hour. Finally put together a nice little session and feels good to go home with a W. We will see you guys soon. All right, jumping into the second session here at Hustler a few days later. If I could have one hand back from the session, it would definitely be this one. The $10 straddle's on. Under the gun limps, we make it 50 from +1 here with pocket fours. The button, the big blind, and the limp are going to call. Beautiful flop, 5-4 king with a couple of hearts, and it checks over to us, and with only one player in position to us, gonna start betting. And also the player in position to us, the button, only has about $40 behind here. He was a short stack. So we go 75 here into 205. The button puts in his remaining $40. And now the big blind, a relatively aggressive recreational player, is going to check raise to 240. Under the gun limper is going to hem and haul, and then finally he is going to find a fold. So I think the under the gun limper here most likely has a hand like king queen or king jack or something like that when he hems and hauls here. That seems reasonable. The big blind has a hand like a combo draw or an ace high flush draw, and I don't think he is folding either of those. He could also have a hand like king 5 suited. And I mean, occasionally he could have pocket fives, but if he has pocket fives, we don't care, whatever, we're getting stacked. So we decide to put in the money here, and now the big blind is going to hem and haul. You can tell he immediately doesn't like it. He's actually gonna find a fold and says he has king queen here, and this is just, obviously, if we knew he had king queen, we put in the call here all the time, but I think maybe when I started this hand, I was being a little bit results oriented. We reduce his combos of king X because we know the under the gun player probably has a king X hands when he hems and hauls before folding. And this just feels like a combo draw or two pair or an ace high flush draw all the time. And I think those hands aren't folding. So actually, after walking through it, you know what? I'm fine with it. But results wise, we do not get what we want. So the big blind folds. We're all in with the button for $4. The turn is a 3 of spades. River is a king. And of course, with our full house, we are good. And we end up scooping a small pot instead of a big one. All right, next hand here, just another example of how low stakes players just essentially tell you what they have with their sizes all the time. We see the button here is pre-folding. He has already checked out of the hand. He's talking to his neighbor. So make a light open in the cutoff here with ace 8 offsuit, just knowing that most likely the button is done with this, and the button does fold. And now the small blind is going to call. We go heads up to a flop, which comes 7-6-4. And now he donks for $40 into 50. When he goes with this big size, I just be folding a lot because I think this is relatively strong. But of course, we do have 2 overs. We've got a gutter to the nuts here. And I think on a lot of diamond cards, he may just check and we can just take it away quite a bit. Now the turn is an ace and the pot being 130. He donks again for 100. This is concerning. I consider just folding. If I did have a hand like ace jack or ace queen or something like that, probably would just fold on this turn. But the fact that I still have a gutter, if he does have 2 pair, we can counterfeit that 2 pair sometimes. If a diamond comes, we can turn a hand into a bluff. So we've got some options. River is now a jack of hearts, and now he goes 215 into 330, and he's just not messing around here. This is just not a bluff. Our hand is never good. He's telling us he has a strong hand. So I actually show him the ace here, just trying to get a little bit of information, just trying to confirm that the fold was correct. And look at that. He shows us 7-4 for 2 pair. So the read was correct. All right, next hand here. This one's super interesting with quite a bit of table talk as well. EP opens to 20, the low jack, hijack, and small blind call. We're in the big blind with ace, deuce of hearts. This hand not good enough to squeeze. When we squeeze, we want to be using good, better, and best because the pot is much more likely to head to a flop multi-way. So you just want to use your good hands. This hand does not fall into that category, but it's good enough to call here in the big blind. So that's what we do. Flop comes king, 7, king with a couple of hearts. So we flop the ace high flush draw and it checks all the way through. Now the turn is a 6 of hearts, giving us the ace high flush, and the small blind comes out and bets $50 here. And at this point, we ask what he has.
What you got?
Full house.
You got full house? I don't believe it.
Don't really see a whole hell of a lot of a reason to raise here. The small blind isn't all that deep, and we're going to get all his money if he has a king or a flush on most rivers anyway, and would like for some of the players in position to us, the EP player, the low jack, and the hijack to come along with hands that are essentially drawing dead. So we just call here. If the big blind was deep, I'd consider putting in a raise right here. I just don't think he has a full house ever. And now the river is the queen of spades, and he comes out and bets 70. And you hear one of the table mates even saying,
That's not a full house bet, sir.
That's not a full house bet. How much is that?
so I don't believe this is a full house. The other guy at my table doesn't believe this is a full house. Now he shows the king. And if I was bluffing here, I don't think I would ever try to get this guy to fold trip kings. It just seems kind of suicidal. And he's only got about 305 back, so 375 total. So I'm just going to put in all of the money here. We jam for 375 effective.
You guys didn't have flash?
No.
Don't? Hey.
Because he lied about what he has, I don't feel bad lying about what I have either. And at this point, since he showed me the king, and I think he's actually possibly considering folding here, I actually am going to show him the ace of hearts. I find sometimes when you show a card like this, it makes the players much more likely to call for whatever reason. They can just think you can be bluffing with the ace of hearts here, trying to run the nut flush blocker or whatever that they had seen in some type of Doug Polk video. So he is going to think it over, and finally, begrudgingly, he is going to put in the call, and we rake in a nice little pot. All right, next hand here against the very same player who we just stacked with his trip kings. He limps under the gun. We make it 30 next to act with pocket quigglies. The cutoff and the under the gun limper are going to call. Flop comes king 3, 6 here, and no real reason to bet multi-way with a player in position to us. We check, and it actually checks through. Now the turn is the ace of hearts, so we do have the second nut flush draw here on this turn when the front door flush draw comes in with the queen of hearts. The small blind bets $30, just under 1/3 pot, getting a pretty good price. We elect to call. The cutoff gets out of the way. The river is the queen of clubs. The small blind checks, and at this point we go for the big bet, targeting all his ace X, targeting all his 2 pair. We go 150, and he snap jams.
What do you have?
I got queens.
Oh, sweet.
So normally for me, this would be a snap fold. I think this is never a bluff in a million years, but I'm considering here, could he be trying to get me back for that last hand? Could he want to show a bluff here and get me back for stacking him in that last hand? But a couple of things make me think no. Number one, when I bet 150 on the river, check jamming on this river versus a pot size bet, just massively under bluff. These ace high boards massively under bluff. I'm just not sure what he could really be turning into a bluff here. Specifically, like we have the queen of hearts. Like what hand is he bluffing here? He went all in. He didn't even think about it. And I think if he did have some type of bluff, which really hard to bluff these 3 Broadway boards, by the way, he would probably just bet himself on the river. So yes, I think there is some meta here, him trying to get me back, whatever, but this spot just massively, massively under. It's just so hard to bluff here after getting a little bit of a live read here You know, he says, "Oh, sweet," when I have pocket queens, and then kind of shuts up. Like he thinks I'm calling here. He wants the call. He doesn't want to do anything to screw that up. So I am going to elect to fold, and I feel pretty good about it because he doesn't show, and if he had a bluff here, he would show every time. So we give him this one and we lose the pot, but feel pretty good about the fold. All right, next hand here, maybe a small blunder or maybe even a medium-sized or big blunder on my part. I'm just opening 100% of hands when on the button, and there are 2 recreational players in the blinds. So as you see here, I don't even look at my cards. I just open to 25. I'm opening any 2 here, and the small blind is going to fold. Big blind is going to call. Flop comes 10 deuce queen, and so we flop bottom pair here on the flop. He checks it over my MO. Single red spot's in position. Gonna choose the size with a raise off. Strong shit call with weak shit, usually around half pot. So half pot is where I go. 25. He puts in the call. We're going to the turn, which is a 3 of clubs. At this point, I have a ton of showdown value. Button versus big blind here. He's just gonna have a ton of draws. So I check it back, planning to bluff catch the river, because what they do on the river when they're bluffing is they just always bet half pot. And that's exactly what happens here. He looks at his cards, he thinks for a second. He is going to come out and bet $50 here, and I snap it. I snap it off so quickly, and he says, "You're good," and turns over pocket 6s. Oops. When they check call the flop on a wet dynamic board and then bet half pot on the river, they're always bluffing, but they're just monkey betting and turning a bunch of random hands into bluffs for no discernible reason. And so I think I should just be raising on rivers a lot when they bet half pot here if I can't beat middle pair. Double board PLO bomb pot alert. This is a big one. So we've got a double board PLO bomb pot, 175 in the middle, 7 players are in. We look down at pocket 6s with king 3, and board 1 comes deuce queen 6, so we flop middle set, and board 2 comes 5 4 queen with a couple of hearts. So we flop an open in straight draw, not to the nuts on that board, but we've got quite a lot going on here. It checks over to us, and with multiple players in position behind us, we are just going to check and see what happens here. My MO bomb pots. So the hijack, who is next to act behind us, is going to pot it. And a note on this player, he is very, very tight. So he is saying he has a very strong hand here when he pots it, and I think he's going to have one of these boards locked down. I am a little bit concerned here. The possibility of pocket queens is out there. So now he gets 1 call in the field here. We are going to call as well, and we are going to a couple of turns here. The top board is a offsuit 10, so that is safe for our 6s. The bottom board is a 7, so now we have the second nuts on the bottom board here, essentially. And when it checks over to us, MP checks to us, at this point the pot's 700, so we're just gonna pot it. And if the guy behind us has queens, well, we're chopping with him. We just want to pile in as much money as possible. We probably have the best hand on both boards here a lot of the time, so we just donk for 700. The hijack is going to call, and MP is going to call all in for less. He only has about 305 left. We're going to a river, which is an ace of clubs up top and a king down below. So we've still got very strong hands on both boards, and the hijack only has about 235 left. So we jam, and the hijack is going to call. We show our hand, and we end up scooping both boards. And this is why these double board bomb pots are so good. And any reg who sits out of these double board bomb pot games is just a pre-flop chart in trench coats, because these games, people are just donating money. All right, just to drive my point home about these double board bomb pots, let's play one more. And the run good is continuing. And we look down here at double suited aces and a double board bomb pots. We got pocket aces suited to the clubs and the hearts, and we get 2 pretty great flops here. Board 1 is ace 4 9 rainbow, so we flop the nuts there. Board 2 is 8 9 queen with a couple of hearts, so we flop the nut flush draw here. Now under the gun is going to come out and pot it for 175. EP is going to call, and hijack is going to call, so this is great news to our ears. It is time to just pile in a lot of money. We think when under the gun comes out and bets this amount, and then a couple players call, obviously a couple of these players just have jack 10, 10. And like, if I was from early position here, first of all, in double or bump pots, I'm just never betting. I'm always checking to see what happens. But like, if I just have like a naked Jack 10 here, this is a spot where you just fold, right? Because you have a hand that cannot improve on board 2. And if you don't have anything going on the other board, like Jack 10 should just be folded here. But people don't really know that, and they're not going to fold Jack 10. So I go 1,000 here. Under the gun is going to call all in for less, so I think about 800. The EP player is going to fold, and now the hijack is going to jam for an additional 200. So we obviously snap it off, and we are all in 3 ways. Board 1, the turn is a 7 of clubs. Board 2 is an 8 of clubs, so not the best board on board 2 for us. Now the river on board 1 is a 3 of clubs, so we actually make the ace high flush on board 1. We flopped a set, but now we have the ace high flush, and board 2 is the king of hearts. So now we have an ace high flush on both boards. We show our hand, and once again we are going to scoop a 3.5k bomb pot here. I don't know what EP had. Pretty good situation for us, scooping 2 huge bomb pots in a row. All right, next hand here, we open queen jack offsuit from EP to 25 doll hairs. The low jack, a recreational player, is going to call. Flop comes jack deuce 4 with 3 hearts, as is my MO from out of position in heads up pots. I am generally checking my entire range unless the player is very passive, and don't see any reason why this player would be, but he quickly checks it back. Turn is a 6 of spades. I think at this point, if he's got showdown value, he's not folding for 1 bet. So we're gonna go big here. We go 50, just under the size of the pot. If the flop was a rainbow flop or a 2 flush flop, and this turn was a blank, we'd go for the check raise here, just expecting him to stab quite a bit, but on a monotone flop, don't expect as much, so just gonna come out and lead. The river is an offsuit 9, pretty clean card for us. And at this point, if he does have a hand like pocket 7s or pocket 8s or 6x or 4x or something like that, I think he may get a little bit sticky after the flop goes check. So once again, we're gonna go big here, but not too big. We would love for him to call with a hand like pocket 8s. We go 125, giving him an enticing price. He is going to flick in the call. Eventually, we will show, and we are good. Another day, another big session. Played about 5.5 hours, won about 4,500 bucks. So finally starting to string together a couple good sessions in a row and finally making hands. Would you believe it? So it's early, it's still early, but we are on pace, so feel pretty good about it so far. And on to the next one we go.